Welcome to Dreamy Old Stories. Here we tell slow and gentle tales from history. Stories that calm your mind and help you fall asleep. If you enjoy the journey, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin tonight's dreamy story. Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that sounds deceptively shiny and glamorous. But like most things in history, it's actually a little weirder, a little sadder, and a lot more human than you'd expect. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's drift back to the Roman Empire. Not the Colosseum. Not the legions marching in perfect formation. No, tonight we're going to talk about glass. Yes, glass. That fragile, transparent stuff you probably broke once as a kid and got yelled at for. The Romans didn't just use it for windows or cups. They turned it into an art form. And because this is Rome we're talking about, they also managed to make it political, elitist, and occasionally ridiculous. Of course they did. So, let's settle in. Imagine the faint glow of an oil lamp flickering against a wall. The air smells faintly of smoke and olive oil. And in the corner, a Roman artisan is puffing into a long iron tube, shaping molten glass into something that might end up on the emperor's table, or in a trash heap 2,000 years later. Now, before we get into the juicy details of glass blowing itself, let's float gently over the basics. Glass wasn't new when the Romans came along. The Egyptians and Mesopotamians had been fiddling with it for centuries. But the Romans, as usual, didn't invent ithy, just took someone else's idea, industrialized it, and then bragged about it like they'd been doing it all along. Classic Rome. The real game changer was the invention of glass blowing around the 1st century BCE, probably in Syria or somewhere nearby. Before that, making glass was a slow, painful process. You had to mold it, cast it, or grind it into shape. It was expensive. It was clunky. It was the kind of thing only elites could afford. But once glass blowing came along, suddenly you could make cups, bowls, and bottles faster than you could say Avenue Caesar. And the Romans loved it. They loved it so much that glass became one of those everyday luxuries that trickled down from the palaces of emperors to the kitchens of ordinary citizens, which, of course, annoyed the elites. Because nothing ruins your sense of superiority, like realizing your servant is drinking out of the same kind of cup you are now. Let's talk about the artisans themselves. These were not glamorous people. They weren't senators or generals. They were sweaty, soot-covered craftsmen working in workshops that were probably hotter than the inside of a Pompeii oven. Imagine standing next to a roaring furnace all day, puffing into a tube and trying not to pass out. That was the life of a Roman glass blower. But here's the thing, their work was stunning. They could make delicate paper-thin goblets. They could swirl colors into hypnotic patterns. They could even create cameo glass toes fancy pieces with raised designs, like the famous Portland vase. And yes, we'll get to that vase later, because it deserves its own sleepy little tangent, of course. Because this is Rome, glass wasn't just about beauty. It was about status. The wealthy wanted glass that was rare, colorful, and difficult to make. Ordinary people got the plain, clear stuff. And then there were the emperors, who surprise managed to turn even glass into a tool for showing off. Take Emperor Nero, for example. Nero was the kind of guy who would absolutely buy the most expensive glassware just to smash it at a party. And in fact, he did. Suetonius tells us that Nero once threw a tantrum and destroyed priceless glass vessels just because he felt like it. Because why not double down on your reputation as Rome's most dramatic diva? Let's float over to another fun little detail. Recycling. Yes, the Romans recycled glass. Not because they were eco-friendly, but because glass was valuable. If a cup broke, you didn't just toss it out, you melted it down and made something new. Archaeologists have found heaps of broken glass in ancient workshops, waiting to be reborn. So, in a way, every Roman glass cup had a past life. Maybe your wine goblet used to be someone else's perfume bottle, romantic in a slightly unhygienic way. Now, let's pause for a moment and talk about the colors. Roman glass wasn't always clear. In fact, clear glass was rare at first. Most glass came out with a greenish tint, thanks to iron impurities in the sand. But the Romans, being Romans, wanted options. So they experimented. They added minerals to create blues, reds, yellows, and purples. Some of these were gorgeous. Others looked like swamp water. But hey, it was variety. And then there was dichroic glass. This stuff is wild. Depending on the light, it changes color. The most famous example is the Lycurgus cup, which looks green in daylight but glows red when lit from behind. Imagine showing that off at a dinner party. Your guests would either think you were a magician or that Bacchus himself had blessed your wine. Of course, not everyone was impressed. The philosopher Seneca, who had a knack for being a buzzkill, complained that people were obsessed with fancy glassware. He thought it was a sign of moral decay, which, to be fair, is exactly what philosophers always say about new trends. If Seneca were alive today, he'd probably be writing angry essays about TikTok. And speaking of moral decay, let's not forget the emperors again. Caligula, for instance, supposedly had a thing for drinking out of ridiculously expensive cups. Because nothing says I'm a stable ruler like sipping watered wine from a goblet, worth more than a soldier's yearly salary. Now, let's drift into the workshops themselves. Picture it, a dark, smoky room, furnaces roaring, apprentices running around with molten blobs of glass on the ends of rods, the master craftsman shaping a vessel with calm precision, while everyone else tries not to drop anything. The air is thick with heat and the smell of burning fuel, and somewhere in the corner, a half-finished vase is cooling, waiting to be polished. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the heartbeat of Roman glassblowing. And here's the thing, these workshops weren't just in Rome, they were everywhere. From Gaul to Egypt, glassblowers set up shop in cities and towns across the empire. Glass became one of Rome's great exports. It traveled along trade routes, ending up in places as far away as India and China. So, the next time you see a piece of Roman glass in a museum, remember it might have gone on more adventures than most of us ever will. Now, I promised we'd talk about the Portland vase. This is one of the most famous pieces of Roman glass ever made. It's a deep blue vase with white cameo figures, probably made in the 1st century CE. Nobody's entirely sure what the scene on it means. Some say it's a mythological story. Others think it's a wedding. Personally, I think it's just another example of Romans overcomplicating their decor. The vase survived for centuries, only to be smashed into pieces in the 19th century by a drunken museum visitor. Because of course it was. Luckily, it was painstakingly restored. But still 12,000 years of survival, undone by one clumsy guy on a night out. Very on brand for humanity. So, where were we? Ah yes, the workshops and the endless piles of broken shards. Let's linger there a bit longer, because honestly, Roman trash heaps are some of the most revealing parts of archaeology. You can tell a lot about a society by what it throws away. And the Romans threw away a lot of glass. Picture it, a mound of discarded fragments shimmering faintly in the sun. Some pieces are thick and clumsy, maybe from a beginner's hand. Others are delicate, thin-walled, and probably shattered in a moment of bad luck. Archaeologists today sift through these piles like treasure hunters, piecing together the story of an industry that was both ordinary and extraordinary. Now, let's talk about the economics of it all. Glass wasn't just art, it was business. Workshops churned out endless bottles for oils, perfumes, and medicines. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of plastic packaging. You needed a container. Glass had you covered. And just like today, the cheaper stuff was everywhere, while the luxury versions were reserved for the wealthy. And here's the irony. The very thing that made glass so desirable, so made it disposable. A clay pot might last for years. A glass cup, one slip and it's gone, which meant constant demand, which meant steady work for the artisans. So, in a way, clumsiness was good for the economy. Let's float over to the aesthetics again. Roman glassmakers loved experimenting with shapes. Some were practical simple cups, bowls, and bottles. Others were less practical, like double-walled vessels with intricate patterns trapped between the layers, or flasks shaped like animals. Imagine drinking your wine out of a glass shaped like a fish. Charming, but also slightly unsettling. And then there were the ribbed bowls. These were made by pressing molten glass into a mold, creating ridges around the sides. They were trendy in the early empire, the kind of thing you'd see in a fashionable Roman household. Think of them as the IKEA glassware of their day, mass-produced, stylish, and just common enough to annoy the elites who wanted something rarer. Speaking of elites, let's not forget their obsession with rarity. The rarer the color, the higher the status. Deep cobalt blue, expensive, rich red, even more so because it required adding gold to the mix. Yes, actual gold. Imagine drinking watered-down wine from a cup that literally cost a fortune to make. That was the Roman elite for you always, finding new ways to turn dinner into a status competition. Now, let's drift into symbolism. Glass wasn't just practical or pretty, it carried meaning. Clear glass, for example, was associated with purity. Colored glass could be linked to the gods or to luxury, and cameo glass, with its layered designs, often depicted mythological scenes. So, when you handed someone a glass vessel, you weren't just giving them a coupe, you were giving them a little piece of cultural messaging. And of course, because this is Rome, there were scandals. One story tells of an inventor who supposedly created unbreakable glass. He presented it to Emperor Tiberius, expecting praise. Instead, Tiberius had him executed. Why? Because if glass never broke, it would ruin the value of gold and silver. Whether the story is true or not, it perfectly captures the Roman attitude. Innovation was fine, as long as it didn't threaten the status quo. Let's pause and breathe here. Imagine the glow of molten glass, the hiss of air as it's blown into shape, the quiet pride of an artisan watching a vessel take form. And then imagine that vessel ending up in the hands of a senator, a soldier, or a servant. Glass connected them all in its fragile, shimmering way. And so, as we continue unraveling the secrets of Roman glassblowing, remember, it wasn't just about technique. It was about people, the artisans sweating in their workshops, the elites showing off at banquets, the philosophers grumbling about decadence, and the ordinary Romans sipping their wine from cups that might break tomorrow, but were beautiful today. So, let's wander into the kitchens of Rome for a moment. Not the glamorous banquets with peacocks stuffed with songbirds, I mean the everyday kitchens, where someone's trying to keep the stew from burning while a slave runs in with a jug of wine. Glass was there too, bottles for oil, jars for sauces, tiny flasks for perfumes. It wasn't just for the rich. By the 1st century CE, even the humbler households had a few glass vessels rattling around. They might not have been fancy, but they were practical. And here's the funny thing. The Romans didn't really use glass for windows in the way we think of today. Sure, they had panes of glass, but they were thick, cloudy, and not exactly giving you a clear view of the garden. More like a vague blur of light. Imagine living in a villa with luxury windows that made everything look like you were underwater. Very chic now. Let's float over to funerary practices. Because of course, Romans loved putting glass in graves. Archaeologists have found tombs stuffed with glass vessels, cups, bottles, even little jars of cosmetics. The idea was that the dead might need them in the afterlife, which is sweet in a way, but also a little impractical. I mean, if you're wandering the underworld, is a delicate glass perfume bottle really your top priority? Still, these grave goods are why we know so much about Roman glass today. Buried underground, away from sunlight and clumsy hands, they survived for centuries. So, ironically, the glass that was meant for the dead ended up telling us the most about the living. And then there's the trade angle. Roman glass traveled far. Pieces have been found in Britain, in the sands of Egypt, even as far as India. Imagine the journey, blown in a workshop in Syria, packed onto a ship, carried across the Mediterranean, hauled overland by caravan, and finally ending up in some distant market. All so someone could pour wine into a cup that might break the next day. But that's the charm of glass, isn't it? Fragile, fleeting, yet somehow eternal. Let's not forget the artisans themselves again. These were skilled workers, often organized into guilds. They passed down techniques from master to apprentice, generation after generation. And while their names are mostly lost to history, their work survives. Every time you see a Roman glass vessel in a museum, you're looking at the breath of someone who lived 2,000 years ago. Literally, their breath shaped that glass, which is oddly intimate if you think about it too long. Now, let's drift into the quirks. Romans loved novelty. So, of course, they experimented with trick glasses. Some vessels were designed with hidden compartments, so you could pour liquid in one way and have it come out another. Perfect for confusing your dinner guests. Others were made with double walls, so you could trap little decorations inside. Imagine sipping wine while tiny glass fish swam around in the walls of your cup. Delightful, and just a little absurd. And then there's the science. Roman glass wasn't just pretty, it was also practical. Doctors used glass vessels for medicines. Merchants used them for measuring. Even alchemists tinkered with glass in their endless quest to turn lead into gold. Spoiler, they never managed it. But they did leave behind some very interesting glassware. Let's pause again. Picture a Roman banquet. The couches, the platters of food, the endless wine, and in the hands of every guest, a glass cup. Some plain, some ornate, some so delicate you'd be afraid to breathe near them. The clink of glass against glass, the murmur of conversation, the faint sound of someone in the corner complaining that their cup isn't as nice as their neighbor's, because some things never change. So, let's wander into the subject of regional styles, because of course, the Roman Empire wasn't just Rome. It was a patchwork of provinces, each with its own quirks. And glassblowing followed the empire like a loyal little shadow. In the eastern provinces, Syria, Judea, Egypt, glassblowing was practically an art religion. These were the regions where the technique first took off, and the artisans there had centuries of experience. Their work was delicate, colorful, and often experimental. If you wanted something truly fancy, you probably imported it from the east. Meanwhile, in the western provinces, Gaul, Britain, Spain, the glass was a little more, let's say, practical. Workshops that churned out sturdy bottles, cups, and storage jars. Less cameo art, more here's a jug for your beer. Which makes sense, because not everyone was hosting imperial banquets. Sometimes you just needed a container that wouldn't leak. Now, let's float over to archaeological finds. One of the most famous hoards of Roman glass was discovered in Cologne, Germany. Yes, Cologne, not exactly the first place you think of when you imagine shimmering Roman treasures. But Cologne was a major Roman city, and when archaeologists dug their base, found entire collections of glass vessels, some still intact. Imagine opening a tomb and finding a 2,000-year-old glass cup that looks like it was made yesterday. That's the magic of glass, fragile but oddly eternal. And then there's Pompeii. Of course, Pompeii, the city frozen in time by Vesuvius in 79 CE. Among the carbonized bread loaves and the haunting plaster casts of people, archaeologists also found glass. Cups, bottles, even window panes. Some were cracked from the heat, but others survived. It's eerie, really, the last drink someone poured before the eruption, still sitting in a glass vessel when the ash fell. Let's not forget the decline. Because, like everything Roman, glass had its golden age and then its slow fade. After the empire started crumbling in the 4th and 5th centuries, glass production declined too. Workshops closed, techniques were lost, the artistry dimmed. By the early medieval period, glass was rare again, almost a luxury. It would take centuries before Europe rediscovered the brilliance of Roman glassblowing. But here's the irony. While the empire fell, the glass itself survived, buried in graves, hidden in hoards, scattered across trade routes. The empire may have collapsed, but the cups and bottles lived on, quietly waiting for archaeologists to stumble across them. Now, let's drift into the philosophy of fragility. Romans loved permanence. They built roads, aqueducts, monuments, things meant to last forever. And yet, they also adored glass, the most fragile material imaginable. Maybe that's the point. Maybe glass was their reminder that beauty doesn't have to last. Or maybe they just liked showing off at dinner parties. Honestly, with Romans, it's probably the latter. And finally, let's circle back to the artisans one more time. Because while emperors and elites hogged the spotlight, it was the anonymous craftsmen who made it all possible. Their names are gone, their lives forgotten, but their work still glimmers in museum cases. Every shard of Roman glass is a whisper from someone who lived, breathed, and worked 2 millennia ago. So, as you drift off tonight, think of them. The glow of the furnace, the hiss of molten glass, the quiet pride of shaping something fragile and beautiful, and the knowledge that, even if it broke tomorrow, for one shining moment, it was perfect. So, as we round out this first part of our shimmering little journey, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Roman glass wasn't just decoration or packaging or a party trick for emperors with too much time on their hands. It was a symbol of the empire itself. Fragile, yes, but also adaptable, spread across every province, both elite and ordinary, both practical and absurd. It was the kind of thing that could sit on a senator's banquet table one night and then be tossed into a grave the next morning, destined to outlast the empire that made it. And that's the irony. Rome's roads crumbled, its aqueducts broke, its emperors fell into the dust of history. But the glass is still here. And maybe that's the quiet lesson. The Romans thought their monuments would last forever. But it's the delicate cups and bottles, the things most likely to break, that ended up whispering their story to us 2,000 years later. So tonight, as you drift off, imagine the glow of a Roman furnace, the soft breath of an artisan shaping molten sand into something beautiful, and the faint clink of glass at a banquet long since forgotten, fragile, fleeting, and yet somehow eternal. Congratulations, you've already outlasted most Roman senators during a late-night debate. Tonight, we're floating forward in time, following the fragile trail of Roman glass as it stumbled, shimmered, and occasionally cracked its way into the Byzantine and Islamic worlds. Because here's the thing, Rome may have fallen, but glass didn't. It just packed its bags, hitched a ride with a few surviving artisans, and reinvented itself in new empires. Like a diva who refuses to leave the stage, Roman glass kept finding new audiences. Let's start with Byzantium. The Eastern Roman Empire, as it liked to call itself, was basically Rome's stubborn younger sibling who refused to admit the party was over. And in many ways, it wasn't. Constantinople glittered with wealth, trade, and yes, Byzantine glassmakers inherited the Roman techniques, but they added their own flair. They loved mosaics. If you've ever seen the shimmering walls of Ravenna or Hagia Sophia, you've seen Byzantine glass at its finest. Tiny tesserae, each one a little square of colored glass, pressed into mortar to create glowing images of saints, emperors, and the occasional, very stern-looking angel. And here's the fun part. Those mosaics weren't just decoration. They were propaganda. When you walked into a Byzantine church and saw Christ staring down at you from a dome of gold and glass, you knew exactly who was in charge, both spiritually and politically. Subtlety was not their strong suit. Meanwhile, glass vessels continued to. Byzantine workshops produced cups, bowls, and lamps, often decorated with Christian symbols. Crosses, fish, doves, the whole iconographic starter pack. Some were plain, others were fancy, but all carried that sense of continuity from Rome. And then there's the trade. Byzantine glass traveled far and wide, just like Roman glass before it. Merchants carried it across the Mediterranean, into the Middle East, and beyond. Which brings us to the next big chapter, the Islamic Golden Age now. If the Byzantines were Rome's stubborn sibling, the Islamic world was the brilliant new kid on the block. From the 7th century onward, Islamic artisans took glassblowing and ran with it. They didn't just copy Roman techniques, they innovated. They experimented with new colors, new shapes, new decorations. They turned glass into one of the great art forms of the medieval world. One of their favorite tricks was luster painting. This involved applying metallic pigments to the surface of glass and then firing it again, creating a shimmering, iridescent effect. Imagine a cup that glows like it's been dipped in starlight. That was luck. And yes, it was as expensive as it sounds. They also loved cutting and engraving. Some Islamic glass vessels are covered in intricate patterns, geometric designs, and calligraphy. Because if you're going to drink water, why not do it from a cup that doubles as a work of art? And here's where it gets interesting. Islamic glass didn't just stay in the Middle East. It traveled back into Europe, especially during the Crusades. European knights came home not just with relics and scars, but with shiny glassware that made their neighbors jealous. In fact, some of the most prized glass in medieval Europe was imported from Islamic workshops, so, in a way, Roman glass made a full circle. Born in the Empire, transformed in Byzantium, perfected in the Islamic world, and then re-imported into Europe, like a cultural boomerang. Now, let's drift into some quirky anecdotes. One story tells of a caliph who loved glass so much that he had entire rooms decorated with glass panels. Imagine walking into a palace where the walls shimmered like jewels. Beautiful, yes. Practical, not so much. One earthquake and you'd be sweeping for weeks. Another tale involves Venetian merchants who were so obsessed with Islamic glass that they basically stole the techniques. Venice would go on to become the glass capital of Europe, but their early inspiration came straight from the Islamic world. So, next time you see a piece of Venetian glass, remember, it's got Roman grandparents and Islamic parents. And of course, we can't forget the science. Islamic scholars weren't just making pretty cups, they were studying glass. They experimented with optics, lenses, and mirrors. Without their work, we might not have telescopes or microscopes today. So yes, your ability to look at bacteria or distant galaxies owes a little something to medieval glassblowers. Let's pause again. Picture it, a workshop in Cairo, Damascus, or Baghdad. The furnace glowing. Artisans shaping molten glass into delicate vessels. The air filled with the smell of smoke and the sound of tools tapping. Outside, merchants haggle, camels groan, and the city hums with life. And inside, a cup is born that might one day sit in a European cathedral treasury, admired as a holy relic, even though it started life as someone's drinking glass. So, let's linger a little longer in the Islamic world, because honestly, they took glass to heights the Romans never dreamed of. One of their favorite inventions was the mosque lamp. Picture a large, bulbous glass vessel, often with a wide neck and flared rim, suspended by chains. On its surface, artisans painted verses from the Quran in flowing calligraphy, sometimes in cobalt blue or lustrous gold. When lit, the lamp glowed with a soft, holy shimmer. Imagine praying under a ceiling full of those. It must have felt like standing beneath a galaxy of stars. And of course, because humans are humans, these lamps weren't just spiritual. They were also status symbols. Wealthy patrons donated them to mosques, partly out of piety, partly out of the desire to have their names immortalized in glowing glass. Because nothing says I'm devout like commissioning a lamp that doubles as a billboard for your generosity. Meanwhile, in Syria and Egypt, glassmakers were experimenting with enamel painting. This meant applying colored designs onto the surface of glass and then firing it again. The results were vibrant, durable, and often covered in intricate patterns. Some pieces show hunting scenes, others geometric designs, others just endless spirals that make you wonder if the artisan was getting a little dizzy at the furnace. And then there's the Aleppo glass delicate. Thin-walled vessels that were so fine they almost looked like bubbles. Imagine holding one in your hand terrified to breathe too hard in case it popped. These were luxury items, the kind of thing you'd give as a diplomatic gift or hoard in a treasury. Now, let's drift westward to Venice, because this is where the story takes another turn. By the 13th century, Venice had become obsessed with glass. The city was perfectly placed for trade. Sitting at the crossroads between east and west, Venetian merchants brought back Islamic glass, ogled it, and then decided, we can do that. And we can make it even fancier. So they did what Venetians always did. They stole the best ideas, added a little flair, and then monopolized the market. By the late Middle Ages, Venice was the glass capital of Europe, and the center of it all was the island of Murano. Murano glassmakers were treated like both celebrities and prisoners. On the one hand, they were highly respected, producing masterpieces that dazzled Europe. On the other hand, they weren't allowed to leave the island. The Venetian government wanted to keep their techniques secret, so they basically locked the artisans in a gilded cage. Imagine being world famous for your craft, but also knowing you'd be executed if you tried to move to Florence. Very Venetian. The Murano artisans perfected cristallo, a clear, colorless glass that imitated rock crystal. It was so pure and flawless that it became the standard of luxury. They also invented millefiori, 1,000 flowers where rods of colored glass were fused together and sliced to create floral patterns. The kind of thing that looks charming in a paperweight today, but in the 15th century it was cutting it. And here's the irony. While Venice was busy showing off, the rest of Europe was still struggling to make decent glass. Northern workshops produced chunky, greenish vessels that looked like they'd been fished out of a swamp. Useful, yes. Elegant, not so much. So Venetian glass became a must-have import, the medieval equivalent of designer handbags. If you were rich, you had Murano glass. If you weren't, you had swamp glass. Let's pause for a moment and picture the scene. A banquet in a Venetian palace, the table glittering with crystal clear goblets, each one so thin it looks like it might shatter if you blink. Candles flickering, light bouncing off the glass in 1,000 tiny reflections. And at the head of the table, a merchant prince smiling smugly, knowing his glassware is worth more than the food being served. Because of course it is. But here's the thing. All of this, the Byzantine mosaics, the Islamic mosque lamps, the Venetian cristallo, traces back to those sweaty Roman workshops we talked about in part 1. The artisans puffing into tubes, shaping molten blobs, probably cursing under their breath. They couldn't have imagined that their craft would survive empires, religions, and centuries, only to end up as a tourist souvenir in Venice. So, we left off with Venice and its glittering monopoly on glass. Let's linger there a bit longer, because honestly, the Venetians were masters at turning fragile objects into political power. The Venetian government treated glass like state secrets. Recipes for certain colors, techniques for cristallo, even the way furnaces were built, all of it was guarded more tightly than a pope's blessing. If you were a Murano glassmaker and you tried to leave the island, you risked assassination. Yes, assassination. Imagine being so good at blowing bubbles that the government sends hitmen after you if you move to Florence. That's how seriously Venice took its glass. And yet, despite all the secrecy, techniques leaked out. Because of course they did. You can't keep artisans locked up forever. Some escaped, some bribed their way out, and soon other regions started producing their own glass. Which brings us to Bohemia. Bohemian glass, from what is now the Czech Republic, became famous in the 17th century. Unlike Venice, which specialized in delicate, thin-walled vessels, Bohemia went for sturdiness and brilliance. They perfected potash-lim glass, which was harder and more durable than Venetian cristallo. This made it perfect for cutting and engraving. Suddenly, goblets weren't just smooth and clear, they were covered in intricate designs, coats of arms, an elaborate scrollwork. It was the kind of glass you didn't just drink from. You displayed it. You showed it off. You made sure your guests noticed the little hunting scene carved into your wine cup. Because nothing says I'm wealthy like sipping beer from a goblet that doubles as a family portrait. Meanwhile, in Northern Europe, glass was finding another home. The cathedral. Stained glass windows became one of the defining features of Gothic architecture. And here's the twist. While Venice and Bohemia were perfecting luxury tableware, cathedrals were turning glass into theology. Picture the great rose window of Chartres Cathedral, sunlight streaming through, painting the floor in blues and reds. Each pane telling a biblical story, each figure glowing like a jewel. For the illiterate masses, stained glass was basically a comic book of salvation. You didn't need to read Latin, you just looked up and saw the entire Bible glowing above your head. And of course, the clergy loved it. Because nothing reinforces your authority like controlling the light itself. Step into a cathedral, and suddenly the outside world disappears. You're bathed in holy color, reminded that God and the church are everywhere. Subtle, not really. Effective. Absolutely. Now, let's float gently into the scientific revolution of glass. Because while artisans were busy making goblets and windows, scientists were realizing that glass could do more than just look pretty. It could bend light, enter the lens. By the late Middle Ages, glassmakers were producing spectacles. At first, they were clunky, perched awkwardly on the nose, but they changed lives. Imagine being a medieval scribe, half-blind from years of copying. Manuscripts by candlelight, and suddenly someone hands you a pair of glasses. It must have felt like a miracle. From spectacles came microscopes and telescopes. Galileo peered at the heavens through a glass tube and saw moons orbiting Jupiter. Leeuwenhoek peered at a drop of water and saw tiny creatures swimming inside. All of it made possible by glass. So yes, the same material that once held Roman wine was now unlocking the secrets of the universe. And here's the irony. While scientists were using glass to expand human knowledge, ordinary people were still using it to drink beer. Two parallel worlds, both dependent on the same fragile material. One shaping the future of science, the other shaping the future of hangovers. Let's pause again. Imagine the journey from a Roman workshop in the 1st century to a Byzantine church glittering with mosaics, to an Islamic mosque lamp glowing with calligraphy, to a Venetian palace table glittering with cristallo, to a Gothic cathedral window blazing with holy light, to Galileo's telescope pointed at the stars. All of it connected by glass. Fragile, yes. Breakable, absolutely. But also eternal in its own way. So, we've wandered through Venice and Bohemia, and we've peeked at Gothic cathedrals glowing with stained glass. Let's linger a little longer in early modern Europe, because this is where glass starts to get quirky. Take Germany, for example. By the 16th and 17th centuries, German princes had developed a taste for oversized drinking vessels. And when I say oversized, I mean absurd. Some goblets were so tall you needed both hands to lift them. Others were shaped like animals, ships, or even entire castles. Because apparently, nothing says I'm a serious ruler like chugging beer from a glass shaped like a stag. And of course, these weren't just for drinking, they were for showing off. Drinking games became elaborate rituals. One prince might challenge another to drain a massive goblet in one go, while courtiers cheered. It was less about the wine and more about proving your manly stamina though. Let's be honest, most of them probably ended up under the table. Meanwhile, in England, glass was becoming a symbol of refinement. The English perfected lead glass in the 17th century, thanks to George Ravenscroft. By adding lead oxide, he created glass that was heavier, clearer, and sparkled like a diamond. Suddenly, English glassware became the envy of Europe. Lead glass had another advantage. It was perfect for cutting. Artisans could carve deep, sharp patterns into it, creating goblets that glittered in candlelight. Imagine a dinner table covered in cut glass vessels, each one catching the light like a jewel. Very classy, very English. And, of course, slightly toxic. Because yes, drinking from lead glass wasn't exactly great for your health. But hey, at least it looked nice. Now, let's drift into the Netherlands, where glass took on a more practical role. Dutch merchants needed sturdy bottles for shipping wine, beer, and spirits. So they developed thick, dark green bottles that could survive long voyages. These bottles weren't pretty, but they were tough, and they became the ancestors of the wine bottles we still use today. So, while Venice was making delicate goblets, and England was cutting sparkling lead glass, the Dutch were basically inventing the liquor store. And then there's France, where glass became tied to luxury and fashion. Under Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, glass was everywhere. The most famous example, the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. Imagine walking into a room lined with 17 massive mirrors, each one reflecting candlelight until the whole space glowed like the inside of a jewel box. It was dazzling, overwhelming, and very much designed to remind you that Louis was the center of the universe. And here's the kicker. Those mirrors were made possible by Venetian techniques, stolen and adapted by French artisans, because even the Sun King couldn't resist copying Venice. Now, let's pause and breathe. Picture the contrast. A German prince staggering under the weight of a stag-shaped goblet, an English gentleman admiring the sparkle of his cut glass wine cup, a Dutch merchant stacking sturdy bottles in the hold of a ship, a French courtier gasping at the glitter of Versailles, all of them connected by glass. But we're not done yet. Because as the 18th and 19th centuries rolled in, glass was about to be industrialized. No more secret recipes guarded by Venetian assassins. No more artisanal workshops producing one goblet at a time. With the Industrial Revolution, glass became mass-produced, cheap, plentiful, and everywhere. Factories churned out window panes, bottles, and tableware. Suddenly, even ordinary households could afford glass. What had once been a luxury of emperors and kings was now sitting in the kitchens of farmers and shopkeepers, which, of course, annoyed the elites, because nothing ruins your sense of superiority like realizing your servant is drinking from the same kind of glass you are. And yet, even in the age of industry, glass kept its magic. Think of the Crystal Palace in London, built in 1851 for the Great Exhibition. A massive structure of iron and glass covering 990,000 square feet. It was like a greenhouse on steroids. Visitors walked inside and felt as if they were stepping into the future. And in a way, they were. The Crystal Palace symbolized the new age of glass, not fragile, not elite, but monumental so. We've wandered through German princes with their stag-shaped goblets, English gentlemen sipping from sparkling lead glass, Dutch merchants stacking sturdy bottles, and French courtiers gawking at Versailles mirrors. Let's now float into the scientific and industrial side of glass, because this is where things get both quietly revolutionary and, in true human fashion, a little ridiculous. Glass and science, seeing the unseen by the 17th century. Glass wasn't just for drinking or decorating cathedrals. It was becoming the key to unlocking worlds nobody had ever seen before. Take the microscope. In the hands of Antoine van Leeuwenhoek, those tiny glass lenses revealed a universe of animalcules, little creatures swimming in drops of water. Imagine the shock. You thought you were drinking clean water, and suddenly you realize it's a microscopic zoo. Comforting dot, then there's the telescope. Galileo pointed his glass tube at the night sky and saw moons orbiting Jupiter, which, of course, annoyed the church, because nothing ruins a good geocentric worldview like actual evidence. But the point is, glass let humans see beyond their natural limits. From bacteria to galaxies, all thanks to a few carefully ground lenses. Glass and medicine. Fragile helper's glass also crept into medicine. Apothecaries stored their potions in glass bottles. Surgeons experimented with glass syringes. Later, laboratories filled with test tubes, beakers, and flasks, all glass. Because nothing says serious science like a room full of fragile containers, just waiting to shatter at the worst possible moment. And yet, despite the breakage, glass was perfect. It didn't react with most chemicals, it was transparent, and it could be sterilized. Without glass, modern medicine would look very different, industrial. Glass, from luxury to everyday by the 18th and 19th centuries. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and glass was along for the ride. Factories churned out bottles, jars, and window panes by the millions. Suddenly, glass wasn't just for elites, it was for everyone. Think of the Crystal Palace in 1851, a massive greenhouse of iron and glass, built for the Great Exhibition in London. Visitors walked inside and felt like they were stepping into the future, and in a way, they were. The Crystal Palace showed that glass wasn't just fragile decoration anymore, it was architecture. And then came skyscrapers. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, glass was climbing higher and higher, wrapping steel skeletons in shimmering walls. The modern city skyline, all those gleaming towers, is basically a love letter to glass. Glass in everyday life, meanwhile. Ordinary people were surrounded by glass in ways the Romans could never have imagined. Windows in every home, bottled beer and soda, cheap tumblers on kitchen tables, even jam jars. The material that once symbolized imperial luxury was now holding your grandmother's strawberry preserves. And yet, even in its most ordinary forms, glass kept its magic. Transparent, fragile, reflective, it always carried a little shimmer of wonder. The quirky side of glass, of course. Humans being humans, there were also some oddities. In the 19th century, some inventors tried making glass coffins. The idea was that you could see the deceased without opening the lid. Romantic, maybe, creepy. Definitely. Unsurprisingly, it didn't catch on. There were also experiments with glass furniture. Tables, chairs, even beds made entirely of glass. They looked impressive, but sitting on one must have felt like living in constant fear of shattering your own furniture. So, what do we make of this long, fragile journey? Glass, in its Roman afterlife, became more than just cups and bowls. It became theology in the hands of Byzantine and Gothic artisans. It became luxury in the palaces of Venice and Versailles. It became science in the lenses of Galileo and Leeuwenhoek. And eventually, it became industry mass-produced, ordinary, sitting in every kitchen cupboard. And yet, through all those transformations, it never lost its contradictions. Fragile but enduring, ordinary but magical, a material that could be both a saint's halo in a cathedral window and a beer bottle rolling under a tavern bench. The Romans could never have imagined that their sweaty workshops would spark a chain reaction stretching across to millennia, that their molten blobs would one day become skyscraper walls, telescopes peering into galaxies, or the glowing screens we stare at every day. But that's the quiet miracle of glass. It reflects us back at ourselves, in all our absurdity and brilliance. So, as you drift off tonight, picture the shimmer of a Byzantine mosaic, the glow of an Islamic lamp, the sparkle of a Venetian goblet, the blaze of a Gothic window, and the quiet hum of a modern city skyline. All of it connected by the same fragile thread, glass born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. We're floating into the modern world, where glass stopped being just fragile decoration and started running the show. Because here's the thing, glass didn't just survive the fall of Rome, the rise of Byzantium, the brilliance of Islam, the glitter of Venice, and the pomp of Versailles. It reinvented itself again and again until it became the backbone of modern life. Without glass, there's no photography, no electricity, no skyscrapers, no fiber optics, no smartphones. Basically, no modern world, which is hilarious, considering it all started with some Romans blowing bubbles in a furnace. Photography, capturing shadows in glass lids. Start with photography. In the 19th century, inventors realized that glass could hold images. Early photographs were made on glass plates coated with light-sensitive chemicals. You'd set up your camera, expose the plate, and then develop it in a dark room. The result? A ghostly image frozen in glass. It was magical, but also impractical. The plates were heavy, fragile, and had to be prepared on the spot. Imagine lugging around a box of glass just to take a selfie. Still, it worked. And for decades, glass plates were the standard for photography. So, the next time you scroll through your phone gallery, remember, your endless stream of cat pictures has its roots in fragile glass plates that broke if you sneezed too hard. Electricity, let there be light bulbs now. Let's float over to electricity. Thomas Edison may have hogged the credit, but the light bulb was really a team effort. And at the heart of it, glass. The bulb itself had to be made of glass, carefully blown to encase the filament and keep out air. Without glass, the filament would burn out instantly. With glass, it glowed. Suddenly, the world had light on demand. Streets, homes, factories, all illuminated by fragile little globes of glass. And of course, people were skeptical at first. Some thought electric light was dangerous. Others thought it was unnatural. But once you've had the convenience of flipping a switch, it's hard to go back to candles. Glass made it possible. Skyscrapers, cities of glass now. Let's look up. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, cities were sprouting skyscrapers. Steel provided the skeleton, but glass provided the skin. Think of the Flatiron Building in New York, or later, the shimmering towers of Chicago. Walls of glass reflecting the sky, turning cities into glittering landscapes. Suddenly, Glass wasn't just something you looked through, it was something you lived inside. And, of course, architects loved it. Glass symbolized modernity, progress, transparency. Never mind that it also turned offices into greenhouses in the summer. Details. Science and glass, peering deeper meanwhile. Scientists kept pushing glass to its limits. Telescopes grew bigger, with massive glass lenses peering deeper into space. Microscopes grew sharper, revealing cells, bacteria, and eventually viruses. Glass became the window to both the infinitely large and the infinitely small. Without it, we'd still be squinting at the stars and guessing what was in a drop of pond water, fiber, optics. Glass becomes the internet, and then came the 20th century, when glass pulled off its greatest trick yet, carrying light itself. Fiber optics. Thin strands of glass, so pure they can transmit light for miles without losing signal. Bundle them together, and you can send information at the speed of light. The internet, phone calls, streaming videos, all of it runs on glass. So yes, the fact that you're listening to this sleepy monologue right now, you can thank glass. Somewhere under the ocean, cables made of glass are carrying my words to you. Fragile, but unbreakable in their own way. Screens, the glass we stare at hand. Finally, we arrive at the present. Glass is no longer just around us, it's in our hands. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, TVs, all glowing rectangles of glass. We tap it, swipe it, drop it, crack it, replace it. We spend hours staring into it, as if it were a modern oracle. The Romans used glass to sip wine. We use it to doom scroll, progress, and of course, modern glass isn't ordinary. It's engineered to be tough, scratch-resistant, sometimes even unbreakable. Though, as anyone who's dropped a phone knows, unbreakable is a generous term. The philosophy of modern glasso, what does it all mean? Glass has gone from luxury to necessity, from fragile decoration to the backbone of civilization. From Roman banquets to fiber optic cables, it's still fragile. It still shatters, but it also carries our voices, our images, our knowledge. It reflects us back at ourselves, literally and metaphorically. And maybe that's the quiet lesson. The Romans thought their empire would last forever, but it's the glass, fragile, shimmering, breakable, that outlived them all. Pyrex, glass meets the kitchenlets. Start with something homely, Pyrex. In the early 20th century, scientists at Corning Glass Works developed a new kind of glass that could withstand sudden changes in temperature. Ordinary glass shatters if you take it from hot to cold too quickly, which, as you can imagine, is not ideal when you're baking a casserole. Pyrex solved that problem. Suddenly, glass wasn't just for windows or goblets. It was for ovens, and of course, it became a household staple. Generations of families baked, roasted, and microwaved in Pyrex dishes. Some of those dishes are still around today, passed down like heirlooms. Imagine telling a Roman glassblower that his delicate goblet would one day evolve into a casserole dish. He'd probably faint. Glass in chemistry and medicine, meanwhile. In laboratories, glass was everywhere. Test tubes, beakers, flasks, pipettes, all made of glass. Why? Because glass is chemically inert, transparent, and easy to clean. Perfect for science. Think of Marie Curie, hunched over her experiments with glowing radium, surrounded by glassware. Or think of modern hospitals, where glass syringes and vials once held life-saving medicines. Without glass, the history of science and medicine would look very different. Stained glass, revival, but glass wasn't just practical. In the 19th century, there was a revival of stained glass. Gothic cathedrals had set the standard centuries earlier, but now Victorian architects wanted their own glowing windows. Churches, town halls, even private homes were decorated with colourful panes. Some of it was beautiful. Some of it was less so. Let's just say that not every Victorian stained glass window was a masterpiece. But the point is, glass once again became a medium for storytelling, light, and colour. Skyscrapers and modern architecture. By the 20th century, glass was climbing higher than ever. Skyscrapers wrapped themselves in glass, turning cities into glittering forests of steel and light. Think of the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, or later, the glass boxes of mid-century modernism. Architects loved glass because it symbolized transparency and progress. Never mind that it also turned offices into saunas in the summer and ice boxes in the winter. Details. Glass in the space age, and then came the space age. Glass wasn't just on Earth anymore, it was in space. Astronaut helmets had visors made of special glass. Satellites carried lenses and mirrors. Telescopes like Hubble peered into the cosmos with massive glass optics. So yes, the same material that once held Roman wine was now helping humanity explore the universe. Not bad for something made of sand. The Cold War and glass. During the Cold War, glass even became political. Think of the United Nations headquarters in New York, a giant wall of glass, symbolizing openness and diplomacy. Or think of the glass curtain wall style of architecture, which became a hallmark of modern corporate power. And of course, there was the phrase glasnost in the 1980s Russian for openness, literally invoking glass as a metaphor for transparency. Proof that even in politics, glass had become a symbol of modernity. The age of screens. Finally, we arrive at the present. Glass is no longer just around us, it's in our hands, in our pockets, in our faces. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, TVs, all glowing rectangles of glass. We tap it, swipe it, drop it, crack it, replace it. We spend hours staring into it, as if it were a modern oracle. The Romans used glass to sip wine. We use it to doomscroll, progress, and of course, modern glass isn't ordinary. It's engineered to be tough, scratch-resistant, sometimes even unbreakable. Though, as anyone who's dropped a phone knows, unbreakable is a generous term. The philosophy of modern glass. So, what does it all mean? Glass has gone from luxury to necessity, from fragile decoration to the backbone of civilization. From Roman banquets to fiber optic cables, it's still fragile. It still shatters. But it also carries our voices, our images, our knowledge. It reflects us back and ourselves, literally and metaphorically. And maybe that's the quiet lesson. The Romans thought their empire would last forever. But it's the glass, fragile, shimmering, breakable, that outlived them all. Safety glass, because humans are clumsy. By the early 20th century, people had realized something obvious. Glass breaks. And when it breaks, it tends to slice people up like a salad garnish. Not ideal. Enter safety glass. The first versions were discovered almost by accident. A French chemist, Edouard Benedictus, dropped a glass flask coated with plastic cellulose. Instead of shattering, it cracked but held together. Voila, laminated glass. Soon, this became the standard for car windshields. Because, as it turns out, people don't enjoy being showered with shards every time they hit a pothole. Later came tempered glass, heated and cooled in a way that made it stronger. And when it did break, It crumbled into little cubes instead of jagged knives. Much safer, much less dramatic. Cars and glass. Windshields to windows. Speaking of cars, glass became one of their defining features. Windshields, side windows, rear windows, all carefully engineered. Early drivers sometimes wore goggles because windshields weren't standard yet. Imagine driving a Model T with bugs smacking you in the face. Romantic in theory, less so in practice. By the mid-20th century, cars were basically rolling glass boxes. Bigger windshields, panoramic rear windows, even designers loved glass because it made cars look sleek and modern. Drivers loved it because they could actually see where they were going. Glass in modern art meanwhile, artists were falling in love with glass all over again. Sculptors like Dale Chihuly turned it into massive, colorful installations that looked like alien coral reefs. Museums filled with shimmering towers of twisted glass, glowing under spotlights. And of course, critics debated whether it was serious art or just fancy decoration. But that's art for you. The Romans would probably have rolled their eyes and said, "We did cameo glass 2,000 years ago. Get over yourselves." Smart glass. The future is transparent now. Let's drift into the futuristic side. Smart glass. This is glass that can change its properties with the flick of a switch. Transparent one moment, opaque the next. Perfect for office buildings, airplanes, or anyone who wants privacy without curtains. There's also glass that can generate electricity, acting as a solar panel while still letting in light. Imagine skyscrapers covered in windows that double as power plants. The Romans would have lost their minds. And then there's augmented reality glass lenses and screens that overlay digital images onto the real world. We're not quite at the sci-fi stage of living inside holograms, but we're inching closer. The philosophy of glass in the digital age. So here we are, surrounded by glass, living inside it, staring into it, carrying it in our pockets. It's our window to the world, our mirror to ourselves, our fragile companion in everything we do. And maybe that's the irony. The Romans thought their empire would last forever, but it's the glass, fragile, shimmering, breakable that outlived them all. From banquet cups to fiber optics, from stained glass saints to smartphone screens. Glass has been the quiet witness to human history. Glass in space, telescopes and beyond. We touched on the space age earlier, but let's linger a little longer. Because glass didn't just hitch a ride into orbit, it became the eyes of humanity in space. Take the Hubble Space Telescope. Launched in 1990, it carried a massive glass mirror, polished so precisely that even a tiny flaw could ruin everything. And of course, there was a flaw. The mirror was ground just slightly wrong, leading to blurry images. Imagine spending billions of dollars to launch the world's most advanced telescope, only to realize it needed glasses. Very on brand for humanity. Luckily, astronauts fixed it with corrective optics, basically space spectacles. And once corrected, Hubble gave us some of the most breathtaking images of the universe ever captured. Galaxies, nebulae, the deep cosmos, all revealed through glass. And now, we have the James Webb Space Telescope with its gold-coated mirrors. Not technically glass in the traditional sense, but still part of that long lineage of humans using fragile, reflective surfaces to peer into eternity. Medical glass, fragile lifesavers back on Earth. Glass kept saving lives. Think of syringes and ampules, those tiny sealed glass containers holding medicines. For decades, Vaccines and drugs were stored in glass because it was sterile and safe. Even today, hospitals are filled with glass for bottles, lab slides, microscopes, surgical lights. It's the quiet backbone of modern medicine. Nobody thinks about it, but without glass, half of modern healthcare would collapse. And then there's the humble thermometer. For centuries, doctors measured fevers with mercury sealed in glass tubes. Not the safest design, but effective. And yes, many of us grew up with the childhood trauma of being told not to bite the thermometer. Glass in every day. Modern life lets not forget the ordinary stuff. Windows, mirrors, bottles, jars. The things so common we barely notice them. But each one is part of that 2,000-year story. Mirrors, for example, became essential in the modern world, not just for vanity, but for science, art, even safety. Rear-view mirrors in cars, mirrors in telescopes, mirrors in lasers, and, of course, mirrors in bathrooms, where we all confront our own mortality every morning before coffee. Futuristic glass, smart, strong, and strange. Now, let's peek into the future. Glass is no longer just transparent. It's becoming smart. Electrochromic glass changes from clear to tinted with a flick of a switch. Perfect for office buildings that want to look futuristic while saving on air conditioning. Solar glass. Windows that double as solar panels, quietly generating electricity while letting in light. Imagine skyscrapers that power themselves just by existing. Flexible glass, yes, it exists. Ultra-thin sheets that can bend without breaking. Perfect for foldable phones, or maybe one day. Roll-up tablets. And then there's the dream of glass city skyscrapers made entirely of shimmering, self-cleaning, energy-producing glass. Beautiful, impractical, and very human. The philosophy of glass, one last time, so here we are, surrounded by glass, living inside it, staring into it, carrying it in our pockets. It's our window to the world, our mirror to ourselves, our fragile companion in everything we do. From Roman goblets to Byzantine mosaics, from Islamic mosque lamps to Venetian, from Gothic cathedrals to fiber optic cables, from Pyrex casseroles to smartphone screens, glass has been with us every step of the way. Fragile, yes. Breakable, absolutely. But also eternal in its own shimmering way. So where does that leave us? We've followed glass from Roman goblets to Byzantine mosaics, from Islamic mosque lamps to Venetian, from Gothic cathedrals to the Crystal Palace, from microscopes to skyscrapers, from Pyrex casseroles to smartphone screens. And here, in the 21st century, we're still surrounded by it. Glass is in our windows, our cars, our labs, our satellites, our telescopes, our phones. It's the material we look through, the material we look into, and the material we can't seem to live without. Fragile, yes. Breakable, absolutely. But also the backbone of modern life. And maybe that's the irony. The Romans thought their empire would last forever, but it's the glass, fragile, shimmering, breakable that outlived them all. It carried their breath across centuries, reshaped by Byzantines, perfected by Islamic artisans, stolen by Venetians, industrialized by Victorians, and now glowing in our hands as we swipe through endless screens. So tonight, as you drift off, imagine the shimmer of a Roman cup, the glow of a Byzantine mosaic, the blaze of a Gothic window, the sparkle of a Venetian goblet, the glitter of a skyscraper, and the quiet hum of a smartphone screen. all of it connected by the same fragile thread. Glass born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires, and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. If you've made it this far, you've already proven you have the patience of a saint or the insomnia of a Roman. Senator stuck in a 6-hour debate about grain tariffs. Either way, tonight we're closing the circle. We've blown through Roman furnaces, Byzantine mosaics, Islamic mosque lamps, Venetian crystallo, Gothic cathedrals, industrial factories, skyscrapers, fiber optics, and smartphone screens. Now it's time to tie it all together, the fragile, shimmering thread of glass that's been running through human history for over 2,000 years. The breath of empires. Let's start where we began, with breath. Roman artisans puffing into long iron tubes, shaping molten blobs into cups and bowls. That simple act breathed into fire, carried forward across centuries. Byzantines turned it into mosaics of saints. Islamic artisans turned it into glowing mosque lamps. Venetians turned it into luxury goblets. Victorians turned it into the Crystal Palace. Scientists turned it into telescopes and microscopes. And we turned it into smartphones and skyscrapers. Every empire thought it was building forever. Rome thought its roads and aqueducts would last. Byzantium thought its mosaics would never fade. Venice thought its monopoly would never break. But what survived wasn't the empires. It was the glass. Fragile, yes. Breakable, absolutely. But somehow, eternal. The irony of fragility glass is the ultimate paradox. It's fragile, one slip, one crack, and it's gone. And yet, it endures. Archaeologists dig up Roman glass that looks brand new. Stained glass windows glow in cathedrals centuries after the masons who built them turned to dust. Fiber optic cables hum under the ocean, carrying our voices across the world. Empires crumble. Kings die. Monuments collapse. But glass survives. The fragile outlasts the mighty. That's the irony. The mirror of humanity. Glass has always been more than just material. It's a mirror. Literally, yes, reflecting our faces back at us every morning, reminding us we need coffee. But also metaphorically, it reflects our desires, our vanity, our ambition, our need to see further, to know more, to connect. Romans used it to show off at banquets. Byzantines used it to dazzle worshippers. Islamic artisans used it to glorify God. Venetians used it to flaunt wealth. Scientists used it to peer into the stars and into cells. We use it to scroll endlessly through cat videos. Different uses, same mirror, the candle goes out. So, as we close this long, meandering journey, imagine the glow of a Roman oil lamp flickering against a wall. Imagine the shimmer of a Byzantine mosaic, the blaze of a Gothic window, the sparkle of a Venetian goblet, the glitter of a skyscraper, the quiet hum of a smartphone screen. All of it connected by the same fragile thread. Glass born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires, and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. Glass in literature and myth. Glass hasn't just been a material, it's been a metaphor. Writers and storytellers have always loved it, because it's fragile, transparent, and just a little magical. Take Cinderella's slipper. In some versions, it's fur. In others, it's glass. And honestly, glass makes no sense. Who wears glass shoes? They'd shatter the moment you tried to dance. But that's the point. Glass is impossible, delicate, perfect, just like the fantasy of Cinderella's transformation. Or think of Snow White's coffin. A glass box, so the dwarves could admire her beauty even in death. Morbid, yes, but also telling. Glass becomes the material of preservation, of eternal display. She's untouchable, yet visible. A fairy tale museum exhibit. And then there are mirrors. From mirror on the wall to Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. Mirrors have always been portals. They reflect, but they also suggest another world on the other side. Glass as threshold. Glass as mystery. Glass as transparency and power in politics and philosophy. Glass has become shorthand for transparency. Glass houses, glass ceilings, glasnost. We use it to talk about openness, fragility, barriers you can see but not break. It's ironic, really. We crave transparency, but we also fear it. Glass lets us see, but it also exposes us. A glass palace is beautiful, but it's also vulnerable. A glass ceiling is invisible, but it's unyielding. Glass is both freedom and prison, depending on how you look at it. The psychology of glass. Why do humans love glass so much? Maybe it's the way it plays with light. Sunlight through a window, candlelight through a goblet, neon through a skyscraper facade. Glass makes light tangible. It turns the invisible into something you can hold, shape, and admire. And maybe it's the fragility. We're drawn to things that can break. A diamond is forever, but glass is fleeting. It reminds us of ourselves fragile, temporary, but capable of catching the light in beautiful ways. The future of glasso, where does it go from here? Smart glass that tints itself. Solar glass that powers buildings. Flexible glass that folds in your pocket. Maybe one day, entire cities made of shimmering, self-healing glass. Or maybe glass will fade into the background, replaced by new materials. But even then, it will linger. Because glass isn't just a material. It's a symbol of fragility, of transparency, of beauty, of the human desire to shape light itself. Glass in religion and the sacred glass has always had a way of sneaking into the sacred. Think of stained glass windows in Gothic cathedrals, not just decoration, but theology in color. Light itself became holy when filtered through glass. Worshippers didn't just hear sermons. They were bathed in them, drenched in blue and red light that turned stone walls into glowing scripture. In Islam, mosque lamps carried verses of the Quran glowing softly in the darkness. In Christianity, chalices of glass sometimes replaced gold, a reminder that fragility could also be sacred. Even in Buddhism, glass beads found their way into rosaries, each one a tiny globe of light. It's almost as if every religion, in its own way, looked at glass and thought, yes, this fragile, shimmering thing, this is how we'll talk to the divine. Glass in fairy tales and folklore, we touched on Cinderella's slipper and Snow White's coffin. But glass pops up everywhere in folklore. It's always the material of transformation, of thresholds, of danger. The glass mountain in European fairy tales, impossible to climb except by the chosen hero. The glass key in Nordic stories, unlocking hidden worlds. The glass heart in some folk tales, symbolizing vulnerability and love. Glass is always the thing you can see through but not pass through. The thing that breaks when you least expect it. The thing that dazzles but cuts. Which, let's be honest, is a pretty good metaphor for life. Glass as a symbol of modern anxiety. Fast forward to today, and glass has become the material of modern anxiety. We live in glass towers, work in glass offices, carry glass phones. We're surrounded by transparency, but also by fragility. One crack, one drop, and it all shatters. Think of the phrase, glass ceiling, an invisible barrier, transparent but unbreakable, or living in a glass house. Total visibility, no privacy. Glass is both freedom and prison, openness and exposure. We love it because it lets in light. We fear it because it makes us vulnerable. Speculative futures, glass domes and beyond. Now let's drift into the speculative. Imagine humanity colonizing Mars. What's the first thing we'll build? Glass domes. Because of course we will. We'll trap air and light under shimmering bubbles. Little snow globes of Earth on a red desert. Or imagine skyscrapers of the future, wrapped in smart glass that generates electricity, cleans itself, and adjusts its tint automatically. Cities glowing like lanterns, powered by their own windows. Or maybe one day, glass will merge with AI windows that don't just let in light, but also display information, respond to voice, even adjust to your mood. A mirror that tells you not just how you look, but how you feel. Comforting, creepy, probably both. The eternal whisper. And so, as we keep extending this epilogue, the story of glass becomes the story of us. Fragile, breakable, shimmering, enduring. Always reflecting, always refracting, always whispering. The Romans thought their empire would last forever. It didn't, but their glass did. And it carried their breath across centuries, reshaped by Byzantines, perfected by Islamic artisans, stolen by Venetians, industrialized by Victorians, and now glowing in our hands as we swipe through endless screens. Glass born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires, and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. Glass, as memory glass, has always been a kind of archive. Not in the way parchment or books are, but in its own quiet, accidental way. Archaeology loves glass. Dig up a Roman villa, and the walls may be gone, the roof collapsed, the frescoes faded. But the glass, sometimes it's still there. A little bottle, a shard of a cup, a window pane turned iridescent by centuries underground. Fragile, yes, but also stubborn. Glass remembers light. Stained glass windows don't just tell stories. They preserve the way medieval people thought about color, holiness, and vision. When you stand in Chartres Cathedral today, you're seeing light filtered through the same glass that lit up the faces of worshippers 800 years ago. That's not just survival, that's memory.glass as keepsake. Think of heirloom glassware passed down through families. A goblet your grandmother used, a vase your great-grandfather bought. Unlike wood or fabric, glass doesn't wear down in the same way. It holds its shape, its clarity, its shimmer. It's a fragile time capsule. Glass, as time glass, is also a metaphor for time itself. Transparent, invisible until it breaks. Fragile but enduring. Hourglasses, sand trickling through glass bulbs, measuring time in fragile increments. The Romans used them, sailors used them, monks used them. Even today, we keep them on desks as symbols of patience. Windows as thresholds. Looking through glass is like looking through time. You see the present, but framed, distant, untouchable. A window is always a reminder that you're here and the world is out there. Mirrors as memory. Every time you look in a mirror, you see yourself in the present, but also a reminder of the past. How you've changed, how you've aged, Glass doesn't just reflect. It reminds. Glass as fragile archive of humanity. If aliens ever dig up Earth, what will they find? Our skyscrapers will crumble, our steel will rust, our plastics will decay. But glass, it will still be there. Shards of bottles, fragments of windows, maybe even intact fiber optic cables. Glass will be our accidental archive. Not the monuments we built, not the speeches we gave, but the fragile vessels we blew, the windows we glazed, the screens we stared into. Our story, told in shards. The candle flickers so. As we keep extending this epilogue, imagine the shimmer of a Roman cup, the glow of a Byzantine mosaic, the blaze of a Gothic window, the sparkle of a Venetian goblet, the glitter of a skyscraper, the quiet hum of a smartphone screen, all of it connected by the same fragile thread, glass born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires, and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. And as the candle flickers lower, the historian's voice slows. The lecture isn't just about glass anymore. It's about us. Fragile, breakable, shimmering, enduring. Glass in dreams, and psychology glass often shows up in dreams. Psychologists have long noted that dreaming of glass can symbolize fragility, vulnerability, or the desire for clarity. Broken glass in dreams often represents fear of failure, or the sense that something precious has been shattered. Clear glass might symbolize transparency, honesty, or the wish to see things as they really are. Opaque or fogged glass can represent confusion, uncertainty, or the feeling that the truth is just out of reach. It's fascinating that our subconscious reaches for glass as a metaphor. We don't dream of steel or concrete in the same way. Glass is the material we use when we want to talk about what's fragile in us, what's hidden, what's transparent, what's breakable. Glass in modern culture glass has become a cultural shorthand. Glass ceiling, the invisible barrier that keeps people from advancing, especially women in the workplace. Transparent but unyielding. Glass house, total visibility, no privacy. A warning against hypocrisy. Don't throw stones if you live in one. Shattered glass, often used in headlines to symbolize breaking barriers, breaking norms, breaking limits. Even in pop culture, glass is everywhere. Think of the iconic scene in Die Hard where Bruce Willis crawls barefoot across broken glass, or the glass of blue meth in Breaking Bad, or the glass slipper in Cinderella. It's always there, shimmering, fragile, dangerous. Magical dot glass as utopia and dystopia glass has also been used to imagine the future, sometimes as paradise, sometimes as nightmare in utopian visions. Glass is everywhere. Crystal palaces, transparent cities, gleaming towers. It symbolizes openness, light, progress. In dystopian visions, glass becomes surveillance. Walls you can't hide behind. Windows that let others see in but don't let you out. Fragile prisons of transparency. It's the same material, but it can be either dream or nightmare, depending on how you frame it. Glass as the human condition. Maybe that's why glass resonates so much. Because it's us. Fragile, transparent, reflective, breakable, enduring. We shatter, but we also last. We reflect, but we also distort. We let in light, but we also hide behind panes. Glass is the perfect metaphor for humanity. Beautiful, dangerous, fragile, eternal, the slow fade so. As we keep extending this epilogue, imagine the shimmer of a Roman cup, the glow of a Byzantine mosaic, the blaze of a Gothic window, the sparkle of a Venetian goblet, the glitter of a skyscraper, the quiet hum of a smartphone screen, all of it connected by the same fragile thread, glass born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires, and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. And as the historian's voice slows, the candle flickers lower. The lecture isn't just about glass anymore. It's about us, fragile, breakable, shimmering, enduring. We're not just talking about glass anymore. We're talking about what glass has meant and still means to us as humans. This is the last act, the slow fade, the historian's voice echoing in the dark before silence. Glass, as the silent witness glass, has been there for everything. It was there when Romans toasted victories, when Byzantines prayed under mosaics, when Islamic artisans painted lamps with Quranic verses, when Venetians locked their glassmakers on Murano, when Victorians built the Crystal Palace, when Galileo tilted his telescope at Jupiter, when Leeuwenhoek peered at microbes, when Edison's bulb lit up the night, when skyscrapers rose, when fiber optic cables carried the internet, when smartphones began glowing in our hands. It has been the silent witness to our triumphs and our follies. It doesn't speak, but it reflects. It doesn't judge, but it remembers. The fragility of empires versus the endurance of glass empires thought they were eternal. Rome, Byzantium, Venice, Britain, all believed their power would last forever, but they crumbled. Their armies dissolved, their palaces fell, their monuments cracked, and yet their glass survived. A Roman goblet dug up intact, a Byzantine mosaic still glowing, a Venetian goblet still shimmering in a museum case. The fragile outlasted the mighty. That's the irony. Glass, as the human condition glass, is us. Fragile, breakable, transparent, reflective. We shatter, but we also endure. We distort, but we also reveal. We let in light, but we also hide behind panes. We are glass, born in fire, shaped by breath, fragile but enduring. Glass in memory, and time glass is also memory. It holds the past in its shards. Archaeologists find glass and reconstruct lives. Historians look through stained glass and see medieval theology. Families pass down glass heirlooms, fragile time capsules of love and loss. Glass is time made visible. Our glasses measure it. Windows frame it. Mirrors remind us of it. Glass as the archive of humanity. If aliens ever dig through Earth's ruins, what will they find? Not our steel, not our plastic, not our monuments. They'll find glass, shards of bottles, fragments of windows, maybe even glowing screens fossilized in dust. Glass will be our archive, our story told in shards. The candle flickers so as this long lecture winds down. Imagine the shimmer of a Roman goblet, the glow of a Byzantine mosaic, the blaze of a Gothic window, the sparkle of a Venetian goblet, the glitter of a skyscraper, the quiet hum of a smartphone screen. All of it connected by the same fragile thread. Glass, born in fire, shaped by breath, carried across empires, and still here, whispering the story of humanity in every shard. And now, the candle flickers lower. The historian's voice slows. The room grows quiet. The story is almost over. Glass in literature and storytelling writers have always reached for glass when they needed a metaphor that was both fragile and magical. Fairy tales, Cinderella's slipper, Snow White's coffin, Sleeping Beauty's glass casket. Glass is always the material of transformation, of thresholds. of beauty preserved but untouchable. Modern literature, Tennessee Williams gave us The Glass Menagerie, where fragile figurines mirrored fragile lives. Sylvia Plath wrote of the bell jar, a suffocating glass dome of depression. Glass becomes a material of vulnerability, of entrapment, of fragility made visible. Fantasy and science fiction, from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass to futuristic glass cities in utopian novels, glass is always the portal, the thing you can see through but not pass through, the barrier between worlds. Glass as utopia and dystopia glass has been used to imagine both paradise and nightmare. Utopia, transparent cities, crystal palaces, gleaming towers, glass as openness, light, progress. The Victorians adored this vision. The Crystal Palace was their dream of a world made of light. Dystopia, glass as surveillance, walls you can't hide behind, windows that let others see in but don't let you out, glass prisons of transparency. In dystopian fiction, glass is often the material of control, fragile but inescapable. It's the same material, but it can be either dream or nightmare, depending on how you frame it. Glass as truth and lies. We often use glass as a metaphor for truth. Crystal clear, transparent, see-through. But glass also distorts. A lens bends light. A mirror reverses it. A stained glass window colors it so, which is it? Is glass the material of truth or of illusion? The answer, of course, is both. Glass shows us the world, but never exactly as it is. It's always bending, refracting, coloring, just like us. Glass as the human archive. If, one day, long after we're gone, someone digs through the ruins of our world, what will they find? Not our steel, not our plastic, not our monuments. They'll find glass, shards of bottles, fragments of windows, maybe even glowing screens fossilized in dust. Glass will be our archive, our story told in shards, our memory preserved in fragile transparency. Glass in dreams, and the subconscious glass, is one of those materials that sneaks into our subconscious. Psychologists note that when people dream of glass, it often carries a sense of vulnerability or revelation. Broken glass in dreams can symbolize fear of failure, or the sense that something precious has been lost. Clear glass might represent honesty, clarity, or the desire to see things as they really are. Fogged or opaque glass often suggests confusion, uncertainty, or the feeling that truth is just out of reach. It's telling that our minds reach for glass when we want to express what's fragile in us. We don't dream of concrete or steel in the same way. Glass is the metaphor of choice when we're trying to understand our own breakability. Glass as utopia and dystopia glass has always been the material of dreams, both the hopeful and the terrifying. Utopian visions, transparent cities, crystal palaces, gleaming towers. Glass as openness, light, progress. The Victorians adored this vision. The Crystal Palace was their dream of a world made of light. Dystopian visions, glass as surveillance, walls you can't hide behind, windows that let others see in but don't let you out, fragile prisons of transparency. In dystopian fiction, glass is often the material of control, fragile but inescapable. It's the same material, but it can be either dream or nightmare, depending on how you frame it. Glass as mortality glass also reminds us of mortality. It shatters easily, just like us, but it also endures, just like memory. A Roman glass cup can survive 2,000 years, while the hand that held it is long gone. Glass is both fragile and eternal. It breaks, but it doesn't decay. It's the perfect metaphor for human life. Temporary, but leaving behind fragments that tell a story. Glass in the future, and then there's the future. Imagine glass domes on Mars, protecting little colonies of Earthlings from the red desert outside. Smart glass skyscrapers generating their own electricity, adjusting their tint automatically, glowing like lanterns at night. Augmented reality glass, where every window is also a screen, every mirror a portal, every surface alive with information. Glass will keep evolving, but it will always carry that same paradox, fragile yet enduring. Glass in art and sculpture. Glass has always been more than utility, it's been art. Ancient cameo glass, Romans carved layers of colored glass into intricate scenes, like the famous Portland vase. Fragile, yes, but also a masterpiece of storytelling in translucent stone. Stained glass, medieval artisans turned theology into light. Every window was a sermon, every color a symbol. Blue for heaven, red for sacrifice, green for rebirth. Worshippers didn't just see the story, they were bathed in it. Modern glass art, Dale Chihuly's massive twisting sculptures look like coral reefs from another planet. Entire museums glow with his installations, proving that glass can be as monumental as marble or bronze. Glass art is always about paradox. Solid, yet liquid in memory. Fragile, yet enduring. Transparent, yet dazzling. Glass as truth and illusion. Often say crystal clear when we mean something is obvious. But glass is rarely that simple. A lens bends light. A mirror reverses it. A stained glass window colors it. Glass shows us the world, but never exactly as it is. It's always refracting, distorting, tinting, which makes it the perfect metaphor for truth, visible but never pure. Glass as memory and mortality. Glass is also about memory. A Roman goblet dug up intact tells us more about daily life than 100 inscriptions. Shard of stained glass from a ruined cathedral still glows with the same light that once fell on medieval worshippers. A family heirloom vase, passed down through generations, holds not just flowers but stories. Glass is fragile, but it endures. It breaks, but it doesn't decay. It's the perfect metaphor for human life. Temporary, but leaving behind fragments that tell a story. Glass in the future, and then there's the future. Imagine glass domes on Mars, protecting little colonies of Earthlings from the red desert outside. Smart glass skyscrapers generating their own electricity, adjusting their tint automatically, glowing like lanterns at night. Augmented reality glass, where every window is also a screen, every mirror a portal, every surface alive with information. Glass will keep evolving, but it will always carry that same paradox. Fragile, yet enduring. The refusal to end. You thought the story was over. The candle was blown out. The historian's voice faded. The room went quiet. But glass has this way of lingering. Even when it breaks, it doesn't vanish. It leaves shards, and shards demand attention. They glitter in the dust. They cut your fingers. They whisper, "We're still here." So here we are, in part 6, the encore, the after story, the fragments that remain when the curtain has fallen. Shards as history historians love shards. Whole objects are nice, but shards are honest. They tell us what was used, what was broken, what was discarded. A shard of Roman glass in a grave tells us about trade routes, wealth, and taste. A shard of stained glass in a ruined cathedral tells us about faith, artistry, and destruction. A shard of a bottle in a 19th century dump tells us about industrialization, consumption, and waste. Shards are the archaeology of the everyday. They're the proof that life happened, that people lived, drank, prayed, celebrated, and broke things. Shards as memory shards also live in memory. Think of the broken vase your grandmother never threw away, glued back together with visible seams. Or the cracked window in your childhood home that was never fixed. A flaw that became familiar. We don't just remember the whole. We remember the broken. Sometimes the break is what makes it unforgettable. Shards as metaphor and, of course, shards are metaphors. Broken glass as trauma, shattered. Glass ceilings as progress. Glass shards as the pieces of ourselves we try to reassemble. We are all shards, in a way. Fragments of experiences, memories, identities. Broken, but still reflecting light. Shards in archaeology and museums, historians and archaeologists have a love affair with broken glass. Whole objects are nice, but shards are the bread and butter of excavation. Roman shards, a single fragment of a cup, can tell you where it was made, how it was traded, and who might have owned it. The chemical composition of the glass reveals trade routes. Sand from Egypt, natron from the Levant. Craftsmanship from Italy, medieval shards. Pieces of stained glass found in ruined cathedrals still glow with color. Even a fragment the size of a coin can show the hand of the artisan, the pigments used. The theological symbolism, everyday shards in 19th century dumps. Archaeologists find broken bottles, medicine vials, ink pots. These aren't treasures, but they're history. They tell us what people drank, what illnesses they treated, what letters they wrote. Museums love to display whole objects, polished and perfect. But in the archives, in the drawers, in the boxes, it's mostly shards. And sometimes, the shards tell the story better than the whole. Shards in literature and poetry writers too have always been fascinated by shards. Eliot wrote, "Of these fragments I have shored against my ruins." Shards as the remnants of civilization. The pieces we cling to when everything else collapses. Sylvia Plath described herself as a pebble in a glass jar, fragile and rattling. Modern poets often use broken glass as a metaphor for trauma, for memory, for the way life cuts and glitters at the same time. Shards are powerful because they're incomplete. They suggest what's missing. They force us to imagine the whole. Shards in culture and history. Shards aren't just metaphors. They've shaped history. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, in 1938. Nazi mobs smashed Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues. The streets glittered with broken glass. The shards became a symbol of violence, fragility, and the shattering of a community. Protests and revolutions. Broken windows often mark moments of upheaval. A smashed storefront is both destruction and declaration. Everyday life. Who hasn't dropped a glass and watched it shatter into 1,000 pieces? The sound is universal, the cleanup eternal. Shards are part of the human soundtrack. Shards in psychology and memory. We carry shards inside us. 2. Memory is shard-like. We don't remember whole lives. We remember fragments. A smell, a sound, a flash of color. Like pieces of glass, sharp and incomplete. Trauma often feels like broken glass. Cutting, dangerous, impossible to put back together. Healing is sometimes about learning to live with the shards, not pretending they were never broken. We are all mosaics made of shards. Broken, but arranged into something beautiful. Shards in myth and folklore, shards have always carried a strange power in stories. Whole objects are magical, yes, but broken ones. They're even more interesting. The shattered mirror. In many European folktales, breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck. Why? Because mirrors were thought to hold part of your soul. Shatter the glass, and you shatter yourself. The ice shard in the heart. In Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, a boy gets a shard of enchanted glass stuck in his eye and heart. It makes him see only ugliness, only cruelty. A perfect metaphor for how a single wound can distort your whole vision of the world. The glass mountain in Slavic folklore. Heroes must climb a mountain made of glass to win the princess. Impossible, slippery, dangerous, but also dazzling. The shard becomes the obstacle, the test, the thing that proves worth. Shards in myth are never just debris. They're curses, trials, fragments of power. Shards in speculative future. If the future archaeologists of Mars or Alpha Centauri ever dig through our ruins, what will they find? Shards, always shards. Shards of skyscraper glass, glittering in the dust of collapsed cities. Shards of smartphone screens, fossilized in landfills, still faintly glowing with ghostly light. Shards of fiber optic cables, tangled like seaweed, carrying no more signals but still shimmering faintly. Our legacy may not be monuments or books, but fragments of glass. The future may know us not by our triumphs, but by our shards. Shards is human metaphor. We are all shards. Memory. We don't remember whole lives, just fragments. A laugh, a smell, a flash of color. Shards of experience. Identity. We are mosaics, pieced together from broken parts. Childhood, love, loss, joy, grief, all shards arranged into a pattern. Mortality, we break, we shatter, but even in pieces, we endure. Shards are not the end. They are the form we take when the whole can no longer hold. The sound of breaking glass doesn't just shimmer, it sings. When it breaks, it leaves behind a sound that everyone recognizes. Sharp, sudden, final. A dropped cup, a shattered window, a bottle smashed in anger. The sound of glass breaking is the sound of endings, but it's also the sound of beginnings. Because once it's broken, it becomes shards. And shards, as we've seen, have their own stories. Echoes in architecture even. When glass is whole, it echoes. Walk into a glass-walled skyscraper lobby, and your footsteps bounce back at you. Speak in a glass atrium, and your voice lingers. Glass doesn't just reflect light. It reflects sound, too. It turns space into resonance. In that way, glass is like history. It doesn't just show us the past. It echoes it. Every shard, every pane, every window is a reverberation of what came before. Echoes in memories are echoes, too. They're not the original sound, but the lingering trace. And often, they're fragile, like glass. A memory can be clear, transparent, letting you see the past as if it was still here. Or it can be distorted, like looking through warped glass. Or it can shatter, leaving only fragments. Glass and memory are both fragile archives. They hold echoes of what once was, but never the whole. Echoes in the future, even the future will echo with glass. The domes on Mars, the smart windows in our cities, the augmented reality lenses in our eyes, all will carry the resonance of the past. Every new pane is an echo of the first Roman goblet. the first Byzantine mosaic, the first Venetian goblet. The future is never brand new. It's always an echo. Echoes in myth and legend. Glass has always been a material of echoes in stories. The mirror as portal in through the looking glass. Lewis Carroll gave us a world that was both reflection and inversion. The mirror didn't just echo reality, it distorted it, turned it inside out. The shattered mirror, folklore warns that breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck. Why? Because the mirror was thought to echo your soul. Shatter it, and you shatter yourself. The crystal ball. Fortune tellers gazed into glass spheres, claiming to see echoes of the future. Not the future itself, but its reverberations, its shadows. Glass in myth is never silent. It always carries echoes of the self, of fate, of worlds beyond. Echoes in music. Glass doesn't just reflect light. It sings. The glass harmonica, invented in the 18th century. It used spinning glass bowls to create eerie, haunting tones. Mozart and Beethoven even composed for it. Listeners described the sound as otherworldly, like voices from beyond. The glass harmonica's curse. Some even believed it drove players mad. Its echoes too strange, too unsettling. Proof, perhaps, that glass carries not just beauty, but danger. Modern echoes. From wine glasses played with wet fingers to experimental music using shattered glass. The material has always been an instrument of resonance. Glass doesn't just break, it hums. It doesn't just echo, it sings. Echoes in philosophy's philosophers too have leaned on glass when talking about echoes of truth. Plato's cave, shadows on the wall are echoes of reality. If Plato had lived later, he might have used glass instead of shadows, reflections in a mirror, distortions in a lens. Descartes and clarity, he spoke of clear and distinct ideas. The metaphor is glass-like, truth as transparency, knowledge as clarity. But as we know, glass always distorts, always refracts. Nietzsche's shards, he wrote of truth as a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting a fragment of reality. Echoes in fragments, never the whole. Glass becomes philosophy's favorite echo chamber. Clarity that is never quite clear, reflections that are never quite true. Echoes in the sand, of course. Echoes live in us. Memory. Every memory is an echo, not the original sound, but its lingering trace. Trauma, shards of the past echo in the present, sharp and cutting. Joy, laughter, echoes too, bouncing in the mind long after the sound has faded. We are made of echoes, just as we are made of shards. The vibration of glass doesn't just reflect an echo, it resonates. Strike a wine glass and it sings. Tap a window and it hums. Even when silent, glass carries the memory of vibration. It's always ready to sing again. That's what history is, too. Not just events, not just echoes, but resonances. The things that keep vibrating long after the moment has passed. Resonance in architecture. Walk into a cathedral filled with stained glass, and you don't just see light, you feel it. The colors resonate, vibrating in your chest. Walk into a glass skyscraper, and the reflections of the city ripple across its surface. A resonance of movement and time. Glass doesn't just sit there. It vibrates with the world around it. Resonance in memories resonate like struck glass. A song, a smell, a shard of light through a window, and suddenly the past hums inside you. Not an echo, not a fragment, but a resonance. something that vibrates in the present, even though it belongs to the past. Resonance in culture. Glass has always been the material of resonance in culture. The Crystal Palace wasn't just a building. It was a vibration of Victorian ambition, humming with progress and pride. The crystal ball wasn't just a prop. It was a resonance of human longing, vibrating with the desire to see beyond the present. The smartphone screen isn't just a tool. It's a resonance of our age, humming with connection, distraction, and endless light. Resonance in Uzui resonate too. We vibrate with the things we've seen, the things we've lost, the things we've loved. We are struck and we hum. Sometimes the resonance is beautiful, sometimes it's painful, but it's always there. We are glass, resonating with the world. Resonance in science. Glass is not just metaphorical resonance. It's literal physics, frequency, and vibration. Every glass object has a natural frequency. Strike it, and it hums. Match that frequency, and it can shatter. That's why opera singers can theoretically break wine glasses, not because of volume, but because of resonance. Optics and resonance. Fiber optic cables carry light by bouncing it inside glass. Billions of echoes of light, resonating through strands thinner than a hair, carrying our voices, our images, our entire digital lives. Fragility and strength. Glass seems fragile, but under the right conditions, it resonates with incredible strength. Gorilla Glass on smartphones, tempered glass in buildings, engineered resonance that resists shattering dots. Science shows us that resonance isn't just poetic, it's the secret life of glass. Resonance in spirituality. Religions have always leaned on resonance, and glass has often been the vessel. Stained glass windows, not just decoration, but spiritual resonance. Light filtered through color, vibrating in the soul. Worshippers didn't just see theology, they felt it. Sacred lamps. In mosques, glass lamps, inscribed with verses, glowed softly, resonating with prayer. The light wasn't just illumination, it was presence, mystical resonance. In many traditions, glass beads in rosaries or malas are touched in rhythm, each one resonating with a prayer, a mantra. A heartbeat. Glass becomes the medium of resonance between the human and the divine. Resonance in art and music. Artists and musicians have always been drawn to glass for its resonance. The glass harmonica, Benjamin Franklin's eerie invention, spinning glass bowls that sang when touched. Mozart, Beethoven, and Donizetti all composed for it. Listeners described the sound as haunting, angelic, even dangerous. Modern installations, contemporary artists use glass not just for light, but for sound. Shattered glass crunching underfoot, suspended shards that chime in the wind. Glass walls that hum when touched. Everyday resonance. Who hasn't run a wet finger around the rim of a wine glass, coaxing it to sing? That's resonance, the hum of the ordinary turned extraordinary. Resonance as human condition. We resonate. To dot with each other, emotions vibrate between us. Laughter spreads, grief echoes, joy hums. With the past, memories resonate like struck glass, vibrating in the present long after the moment has passed. With the world, we are struck and we hum, sometimes beautifully, sometimes painfully, but always resonantly. We are glass, resonating with the world. The glow of glass has always been about light. It doesn't just hold it, it transforms it. A stained glass window doesn't just let sunlight through, it turns it into a story. A Venetian goblet doesn't just catch candlelight, it makes it dance. A smartphone screen doesn't just glow, it becomes a portal to other worlds. Even when the fire is gone, glass remembers light. It holds a faint shimmer, a ghost of brightness. That's the afterglow. Afterglow in history of every age leaves its afterglow in glass, Rome. The iridescence of ancient glass. Weathered by centuries underground, shimmering with colors the makers never saw. Byzantium mosaics that still glow, even in ruins, even when the gold leaf has faded. Venice, goblets that sparkle in museums, catching modern light as if it was still Renaissance candlelight. Modernity, skyscrapers that blaze at night, their glass facades glowing like artificial suns. Each era thought it was the present, but in glass it became afterglow. Afterglow in memory. To have afterglow, a childhood window, sunlight slanting through it, still glowing in your mind decades later. A broken bottle from a celebration, its shards catching light long after the party ended. A mirror that once reflected a loved one's face, now reflecting only you, but still glowing with their presence. Memory is afterglow. The light remains, even when the moment is gone. Afterglow in us, we are afterglow. To dot our lives shimmer with the light of those who came before us. Our words, our actions, our creations, they glow faintly after we're gone. Like glass catching the last rays of sunset, we are not the fire, but the shimmer it leaves behind. Afterglow in subs glass has its own way of remembering light. Phosphorescence, some glass, doped with rare earth elements, glows faintly after the light source is gone. It's not magic, it's electrons slowly releasing energy. But it feels magical, like the glass is holding onto the day just a little longer. Radiation glass in deserts where atomic bombs were tested. Sand fused into greenish glass called trinitite. It still glows faintly in Geiger counters, the afterglow of destruction, fiber optics, even when the signal stops. There's a faint afterglow in the glass strands, a ghost of light that lingers for a fraction of a second. Science tells us that afterglow is just physics, but it feels like memory. Afterglow in art. Artists have always chased afterglow, stained glass when the sun sets. The windows still hold a faint shimmer, as if reluctant to let go of the day. Venetian chandeliers, even after the candles are snuffed. The glass arms glimmer with the memory of flame. Modern neon, switch it off, and the tubes still glow faintly. A ghost of color. Art in glass is always about light, not just when it shines, but when it fades. Afterglow in philosophies. Philosophers too have leaned on afterglow. Legacy, what remains of us after we're gone, is our afterglow. The faint shimmer of our actions, our words, our creations. Memory. Plato might have called it the shadow of the fire on the cave wall. Nietzsche might have called it the shimmer of a shattered truth. We might just call it the glow of what lingers. Truth, afterglow, reminds us that nothing is permanent, but nothing is entirely gone either. Everything leaves a trace. Afterglow. In Uswe are afterglow. The stories we tell are afterglow. The memories we leave in others are afterglow. The fragments of ourselves that shimmer in the world after we're gone. That's our afterglow. We are not the fire, but the shimmer it leaves behind. The cooling of fire glass is born in fire. Sand, soda, lime, all melted into liquid light. But eventually, the fire cools. the furnace goes dark. The molten glow hardens into silence. And yet, even in cooling, there is warmth. The embers of the fire remain in the glass itself, a memory of heat, a trace of flame. Embers in history, every civilization leaves embers in its glass. Rome, the iridescent shimmer of weathered cups, glowing faintly with the memory of Empire Byzantium. Mosaics that still catch the sun. Embers of a vanished world. Venice, goblets that sparkle centuries later. Embers of Renaissance ambition, modernity, skyscrapers lit at night. Embers of industrial fire glowing in the dark. The fire is gone, but the warmth remains. Embers in memory. Two are embers. A candlelit dinner long past, but the warmth still lingers. A childhood window, sunlight slanting through it, still glowing in the mind. A broken vase glued back together, still carrying the warmth of the hands that held it. Memories are not flames. They are embers, faint, fragile, but enduring. Embers in Usui are embers. To our lives are brief flames, but what we leave behind is warmth. Our words, our actions, our creations. They glow faintly after we are gone. We are not the fire, but the embers it leaves behind. Embers in science embers are not fire, but they are not yet ash. They are the in-between, the liminal state. Thermodynamics. Embers are the slow release of energy, the last whisper of combustion. They glow because carbon atoms are still rearranging themselves, giving off light as they fade. Glass and heat. When glass cools, it holds onto warmth longer than you expect. Touch a kill-fired piece hours later, and it still radiates faint heat. The ember is in the glass itself, a memory of fire. Entropy, embers, are entropy in action. Order dissolving into disorder, flame into ash. But in that dissolution, there is beauty. Embers in spirituality religions have always loved embers, sacred fires in Zoroastrian temples. The eternal flame is kept alive, glowing like an ember of creation itself. Hindu rituals, after the fire of a puja dies down, the embers are still sacred, still warm with blessing. Christian candles, even when the flame gutters out, the wick glows red for a moment, a tiny ember of faith. Embers are the reminder that even when the fire is gone, the sacred lingers. Embers in cultures, too, live in their embers. Languages, a dying language is like an ember, faint, fragile, but still glowing in the mouths of a few speakers. Traditions, old customs, half forgotten, still practiced in corners of the world, glowing faintly like cultural embers. Cities, ruins, are embers of civilizations. They no longer blaze with life, but they still glow with memory. Embers in Usui are embers. Too, love, passion may fade, but affection lingers like embers, softer, but enduring. Grief, loss, is an ember that never quite goes out. It glows quietly, sometimes painfully, sometimes tenderly. Legacy, what we leave behind is not flame, but embers, faint warmth in the lives of others.